I'm a unique photography content creator in that I don't own or have much interest in owning any photography gear that I don't need or use. So when the Nikon Z8 hit the scene as the most anticipated camera release I had ever seen, it might have been surprising when I reasoned that I would get it later down the road. But after an ill-timed event, it kind of became a need. I don't want to repeat every other content creator's information regurgitation or speak on unconfirmed reports on performance. So while I'm late to the Nikon Z8 content, I've gathered all the facts on the things that are important to me. Here's the layout of my Nikon Z8 video. I'll break this down into 3 parts. First, we'll hit the first impressions where I lay out my first look, touch, and opinions on the system. And in section 2, I'll do some chop busting where I'm going to clown how ridiculous people can be in regards to the Nikon Z8 before finally getting into the results of real tests under real use conditions, not ridiculous, unrealistic stress tests. First impressions. The Nikon Z8 did not have the same effect that the Z9 had on me. When my Z9 arrived, I literally walked around my house with it in my hand for like a week with a level of pride unrivaled by anything else in my life. It's my biggest photography purchase to date and the best camera I've ever owned to date, and I worked really dang hard to get it. But the Nikon Z8 is still really special to hold, and here's why. I decided to never question Nikon's moves again because of the Z8 and one other particular lens, which we'll hear about in the future. By the way, if you keep finding yourself coming back to the channel and you're not yet subscribed, I hope you'll join us now so you can catch that mystery lens video on launch or easily find it in the future.
Whatever do I mean by never questioning Nikon again?
As it relates to the Z8, it's the dimensions. When I first pulled it out of the box, something felt incredibly familiar, and I said to myself out loud, hey, that feels incredibly familiar. And no, it didn't feel like the D850 to me, because the D850 didn't really fit well in my hand. It felt like I couldn't get a good grip on it. No, it felt like I was holding the Nikon D610 again, and I felt happy. Check out these dimensions. While everyone talks about its X% of the Z9 size and X% of the D850, it's within 50 thousandths of an inch of that classic Nikon DSLR, and by the way, that's 0.05. Yes, 0.05 of 1 inch. That's very small. You combine this with the good thing, that is that it has the same guts as the Z9, thus the same performance, more on that later, and that is why I will no longer be questioning Nikon. Nikon just made a mirrorless camera to grab all of the DSLR holdouts. Besides the OVF versus EVF experience, there are even fewer reasons now why people may be holding out besides just cost. In the comments, let us know why you're not switching yet. No judgment, I love DSLRs too. Overall, the Z8 is very, very comfortable to hold. Construction. Right out of the box, you can tell that the Z8 is not made with the same materials as the Z9. It feels very light for its size, and you may also notice that some buttons are the exact same as the Z9, and some feel like small corners were cut for cost. Example being the command dials do not feel the same as the Z9. They feel like, for lack of a better word, just cheaper. I don't think the Z8 feels poorly made, okay? You can just tell that the Z9 is made better, and it should be. It costs more, and the predecessors of the Z9 have a reputation of being part camera, part weapon. Not all the switches feel this way, just some. I'm not concerned, so I'm not gonna waste your time showing you me pushing all the buttons and flipping all the dials. Performance. I don't want to regurgitate what everyone else has said, but I kind of have to because they're right. I don't see any difference from the Z9. From macro to portraits to landscapes to street photography, I haven't seen any difference in performance. Initially, I was hoping for a higher megapixel camera for variety. That was up until I fell in love with the Z9's output. That is what I want, and that is what Nikon gave me in the Z8. The card and battery. I like the Nikon Z9 having 2 CFXBs, and if the Z8 was the same, I'd also be happy. But I also like the smaller version of the Z9 having a CFXB and an SD. Why? Because an SD will fit into my desktop directly and directly into my laptop and even my iPad with a little flash drive size adapter. SD cards can literally be found at some gas stations if you somehow find yourself nowhere near a Walmart or Best Buy and you left your card at home. My audience knows that I like options, and so this is kind of a nice touch in my opinion. Later on, I'm going to clown the battery naysayers, but for now, I like the EN-EL15 form factor for the Z8. If you've been in Nikon a while, like me, you've already got them. I've got two 15Cs and one 15B myself. If you are new to Nikon, they're really not that expensive, something like $60 at the making of this video. Let's move on to user experience, concluding this first section. I have very much enjoyed the Z8 so far, and I believe everything that I was hoping for has been fulfilled. It is super comfortable, the files are incredible, and exactly what I hoped to see. As I hoped for, I now have two cameras, the Z8 and Z9, to dual wield that will do the exact same job, the exact same way, and leave me not needing to buy another camera until either of them fail. My anticipation now is just for lenses, because I can't think of any other feature that I'd use that isn't included. I'm already not missing shots ever, and finally Nikon has provided me with two systems and two styles that I love so much that I don't want to upgrade, let alone need to. If I could, however, add one thing to the Z8, it's the thing that idiots really struggled with, and that was the card door lock. I actually like that. No, it's not hard to open, and if you want a funny video, go check out the short I made on it. The overheating argument. Before I get into the notes of my real use case, observations of battery life, and overheating, we need to clown some folks first. I'm so over it. Is there anybody that's reasonable anymore? I'm just asking. I just want to know. If you're testing the potential of overheating with the screen out and on and off a tripod and the battery door open, you have the wrong camera, ding dong. Who cares? That is not a real use case. If it is, I dare you to swing the Z8 around like an indie filmmaker trying to record a feature-length film on one battery and memory card in 8K RAW, because you are going to break off that screen and door on your $4,000 camera. You also probably don't have a card big enough to do it in one take. Okay, so if you want to test it, I guess that's fine. That's cool to see how far you can push it. No shade, I guess. I just find it a little silly. In my opinion, I love you, but bottom line, you can't expect the exact same thing out of the Z8 as you do the Z9, and it's not because of price, it's literally physics. The battery argument. You wanted the EN-EL18 battery. I love this community and I love this industry, but I understand you. If the Z8 was big enough to support that battery, you'd be mad that it was too big. You'd also complain about the price difference between the 15 and 18 batteries, which is just over double the price. I know that it would be nice to have one battery to rule them all. I'd love that, but let's be reasonable. Again, it's physics. And by the way, just a little bit of hope. There is always the case of backwards compatibility in the future when batteries get more efficient over time, as they tend to do. The technology argument. Nikon didn't do anything new and the Z9 is 2 years old. I guess that's why people still use the D5s, huh? The Nikon D850 surely isn't usable anymore. People gave up large format and medium format and 35mm film, didn't they? Bird photography didn't even exist before autofocus. Honestly, what more do you want? You're gonna FOMO this camera anyway, and if you're not, you're probably not a Nikon shooter, or you don't need the performance or the technology. The Z9 hasn't failed me yet, therefore the Z8 won't either. Unless the camera is going to start levitating or posing your model for you or making phone calls, I don't know where else to go. My biggest problem with where the technology is going is the disconnect that we're gonna get from the process, which for a working professional may be great if the camera is doing your job for you, but I'm not working anymore, nor do I ever want to be. I genuinely wonder at what point photography stops being photography and becomes shutter button operator. Why do you think the Z8 appeals to me? I already said it before. I don't want anything that doesn't operate exactly like the Z9. It rides that line between convenience and overkill, and I don't want my only job to be composition, so thank you, Nikon. If cameras get any crazier, I may become a future holdout with the Z9 and the Z8. Joking and clowning aside, at least at the making of this video, drop the argument that Nikon has been left in the dust. Nikon does still lead the pack in some ways, while others lead the pack in other ways. EVF and backscreen resolution. First off, I get the backscreen argument. Who wouldn't like a little bit more on that? But side note, the backscreen is really nice and high quality. It does look great and I'm not left wanting. But the EVF, have you looked through it? Resolution is not everything apparently, and you could have fooled me until I got the Z9 and now Z8. I'm no camera designer and I don't care enough to dig into it because at the end of the day, the EVF is real darn nice. I would assume it's the quality of the materials within the EVF, but who knows? I've played with and tested from every single brand, and at this video's launch, this is the closest to reality that I have seen. People talk about how the Z9 and the Z8 are the brightest EVFs, and that doesn't sound right to me, although I agree. Really, it's the clarity and true to life is a better description. It is the closest to an OVF that I have seen, with all the perks that come with it being an EVF. In my mind, as far as how the EVF looks, quality, not technology, is what makes these EVFs seem like they have peaked for now. Now, the moment that some of you have been waiting for. But first, I have decided to change channel membership to make it more accessible to more people who want to be directly involved with my content creation. As of this video's launch, there is only one membership tier, and it is as cheap as YouTube will let me go. Of that 99 cents that you'll see, I get to keep about half. So if you'd like to show your support and have a direct impact on ZWade photo content creation, I'd appreciate that support. Overheating and battery tests. In these examples where I'm making video with the Z8, it was always outputting to the Atomos Ninja 5, but the Atomos was not recording, simply being used as a monitor to see myself, and the Z8 was in full-time AF using human eye tracking. You should consider these results not really as tests, but rather as observations. I've noted the details of everything that I've done with the Z8 so far, and I'm thrilled to stop caring about it and having to carry around a pen and paper. I only care about what I use the camera for, so the results are based on realistic use cases for me, and maybe just a tad of experimentation. Let's go. Battery number 1 was the included EN-EL15C, which arrived with no charge. After a full charge, I spent 45 minutes in the menus trying to set it up exactly like my Z9, and it's important to keep in mind that the back screen was active basically the entire time without rest. Then, using a 128 gig SanDisk Extreme Pro CFX B card, I recorded a 13-minute long 4K 60 8-bit H.265 SDR video and got a hot card alert only. I touched the camera and noted that the bottom barely felt warm. Later on, I shot 150 photos before taking a break and then recorded another 13-minute long video with the same settings where I got a hot card warning again with the same barely warm Z8 bottom. The battery did not die on me, but was on its final bar. It probably doesn't matter, but in my office, it's directly down the hall from a window AC unit that only barely keeps my office cool. I'm actually very hot right now. On the next charge the next day with a different EN-EL15C battery, I did the following on a Sony TUF 128 CFX B card. 2 10-minute long 4K 30 10-bit H.265 SDR videos back to back where I did get a hot card warning but didn't note the time. I took a 5-minute break where the hot card alert went away in 2 minutes, which was timed on my iPhone stopwatch. After a short bathroom break and a change of video settings, I shot additional 2 each 13-minute 4K 30 8-bit H.265 videos back to back. In the first video, I achieved a hot card alert fairly quickly, and by the end of this second video, I had achieved a red level hot camera, but did not reach high heat warning, which is where you would be at risk of automatic shutdown. The camera did indeed feel very warm to the touch at this point. At the end of this content creation power hour, I had 2 bars remaining on that battery. The next day, without changing the battery, I made a 20-minute long 4K 30 8-bit H.265 video, which left me with 1 bar on the battery and had just hit red level hot camera by the time I finished and hit stop recording. After a cooldown, I went outside where I managed to get 35 handheld macro shots on continuous autofocus before the battery died. The next charge, we are back on the included battery. On May 29th, I made 2 back-to-back 10-minute 4K 38-bit H.265 videos on the SanDisk again and got a hot card. By the end of the second one, I may have seen a yellow stage hot card flash for a split second as I was reaching to hit stop recording, but I can't be certain of that. I took a 10-minute break and came back to do another 20-minute video and noticed that the hot card alert was on in the 16 to 17-minute mark, but it could have occurred before then, but there was no hot camera alert. The next day, Vahagan from Photography, his YouTube channel will be in the description, was kind enough to invite me on his live stream with the incredible Nikon ambassador Dixie Dixon. I used the Z8 as a webcam with the Nikon utility app. It embarrassingly died live after an hour or so, and I put the next battery in. The camera was not warm. On this battery, I finished up that live stream in about 30 more minutes. The next day, I learned that after the live stream, I did not turn it off and it had been on standby for 12 hours. So I celebrated by shooting a total of 461 images before it finally died in the field. The majority of these images were using flash, and I made a point not to turn off the camera. On the final battery test, I wanted to see exactly how many shots I could get in my preferred settings, which is a 20 seconds to standby on all options, and also turning the camera off between walking to new scenes. And the results are, well, I got pretty bored because I already had an opinion on the Z8, and it turns out I don't shoot photography like this. I take a full charge into the field, and I've never had to swap batteries in the field, and when I get home, I put it on the charger. However, just in case you're curious, the battery had just dropped to 1 bar at 1,067 images. Keep in mind, I never removed the battery over the course of 8 days. So the moral of the story, the battery usage will vary, but it's actually really good as mirrorless cameras go. I don't feel like it's any different than the Z6 II, Z7 II, or whatever. It seems to be about the exact same. I'm adding one little extra piece after I wrote the script before I tell you the biggest problem with the Nikon Z8. Let's talk about the recall. The elephant in the room, well, of course it's blown out of proportion. To date, I've heard a few cases where there's actually an issue with people getting their lenses on, and these are people I know personally from my community. The videos I've seen, certain lenses won't go on, but if they go to put on another lens and then try the original lens again, it's fine. And so I'm confused on how big of a problem it actually is. But anyway, recalls are normal. They are a bad look, sure, public opinion and whatnot, but recalls do happen to everyone. Canon, Nikon, Sony, it doesn't matter. Give it a rest. Nikon is doing the right thing by not ignoring it and taking care of all Z8s, period, that are in this affected serial number, whether you're having the issue or not. So for real, like, lighten up. Now we can talk about the huge problem with the Z8, and the problem is you. That's right, I said it. If no one else is going to, I'll roast you. The Nikon Z8 was exactly what everyone who didn't have a Z9 was asking for, and Nikon delivered. They finally listened, but now please rewind and listen to all of the complaints again and ask yourself if you're just looking for something to gripe about. I mean, yeah, there is no perfect camera, but really, call the wambulance because you'd complain about that too. You're the kind of person that would win $1 billion lottery and cry that it wasn't $1,000,000,001. Yes, we know I love Nikon, the brand, and their products, but I have called them out on silly happenings when they need to be called out on silly happenings. This is not the product to call them out on. Nikon nailed this camera. If you don't like it, at least for now, good luck finding Z8 guts anywhere else at that launch price. I'm ZWade, the ZWade in ZWade Photo, and I'm happy with my Z8 purchase.